Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Tutoring Tips episode of the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is Aaron Kahn of Prepped and Polished. Please be sure to check out our website, www.preppedandpolished.com. For tutoring, in person or online, call us at 781-753-9951 or chat with us instantly on our website. You can join our Prepped and Polished community on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Prepped and Polished. If you have a question after the show, please feel free to ask us a question on the chat feature on our website. We'd love hearing from you. Now, let's get right into episode number 229, finding a reason for your answer for rhetoric-based questions. When dealing with either the SAT Writing and Language section or the ACT English section, it's important to always determine what type of question you are trying to answer on each section, whether or not it is punctuation, aka something dealing with a comma, semicolon, dash, whether it's grammar, something like a verb, adjective, pronoun, or what our topic is today, rhetoric. AKA when they start asking questions or start saying to yourself, all these answers sound the same and they all look the same. Now, if you are dealing with the rhetoric section, typically this is when the portion of the test asks you a question as to something, what does this do or does this work? Typically we see questions asking if author should add this, or the author should delete this, or the author is trying to say X, Y, or Z. Now, when I start seeing these questions, and what I always tell students is that the second we see a question, I underline what it is that they are looking for. If they are asking for the most concise answer, well, we have to look for the most concise choice. That gets the point across and is correct. When dealing with rhetoric questions, typically we don't have to worry about either grammar or punctuation. Usually the author says, assuming that all are logical, correct, and comprehensive, which choice works best? So we don't have to worry about, is the comma necessary here? Does the period work here? Is this the correct tense? We're asking here is, does it fit within the sentence or within the paragraph? So when I look at this, I ask, well, what does this portion of the passage literally state? I read typically the whole sentence, sometimes multiple sentences, either right before or immediately after, and if need be, I read the whole paragraph. Now, there are some questions that ask us to take a look at the passage as a whole. If they're asking me to take the whole passage into account, of course, we have to take the whole passage and make sure we understand what's happening. Now, once I determine what the question is asking, I sometimes have to determine, well, yes or no. This comes into effect with either inserting, deleting, or replacing information, or asking if the author accomplished a certain goal. If I can say, yes, this works, yes, this doesn't work, yes, this is the correct revised version, or yes, the author accomplishes the goal, as well as if it is a no, I then have to come up with a reason why. Now, usually what happens with most students in this situation is once they say yes or no, they immediately go towards the answer choices and, unfortunately, sometimes get tripped up by the subtle differences between yes because X, yes because Y. Now, if we're trying to avoid this, I get students to think about, well, what in your own words, why does this need to be added? If they can give a comprehensive reason why, and they find that answer in one of the answer choices, the likelihood is that it is correct, that is their answer choice. This allows them to then avoid certain trap answers from reading too many of either the same answer, but slightly different, or something that isn't even mentioned in the passage. Now, if they say yes because the author never stated this, and they look at their answers, and there is no answer choice that says that either directly or indirectly, that gives them the opportunity to consider, maybe it isn't a yes. Maybe it's a no. Well, why would I not want this here? If they can think of the alternative, or as I like to think of it, the counter argument, then if they can create that counter argument, then you can look at the answer choices. If you find the answer that follows that counter argument, you might actually be correct. Another issue that sometimes students find is that they see these questions as very opinionated. And yes, they are very opinionated. However, it's based on multiple choice, which means you only have so many answers to work with. And if you think that it should be added and none of the answers there give the right reason why it should be, it can't be added. So I use that as a way to double check, saying, well, if I think it is, but there's no answer choice here that states it, can't be it. As you go through from question to question type, if you find that these questions tend to be the most challenging, I would recommend a couple of things. First of all, make note of those questions as you're going through them. If you're looking at rhetoric-based questions, trying to develop your answer and base it off of the answer choice that are given, if you know those are the questions that you struggle with most, you have one of two options. One, you skip them for the time being and answer the other questions. Or two, you answer those questions first, but know that you might need a little bit more time in order to answer them. Usually these questions do take longer compared to something like a comma use or a verb tense question. However, if you find that you are particularly good at these questions, what I would recommend then is trying to consider shaving off a little bit of time when answering them so that the other questions can get just as much focus. Now, the only way to really get really good at answering these rhetoric-based questions and finding a reason for your answer is by practice. I recommend if you're working with us, to talk to your tutor about specific question examples, either asking to say, why is this correct, or why is this not correct, or consider finding a passage on your own time, reading it, and say, why is the author bringing this up? The simple question of why can be placed on either the writing language section of the SAT or the English section of the ACT, but also in other sections of the test, math, reading, the essay. So if you're working on building up your reasoning, validating, providing evidence for your answer choice for rhetoric-based questions, it's going to help you in other aspects of the test as well. And we're happy to help you find that route to answer these questions correctly. This wraps up our show, episode number 229, Finding Reason for Your Answer for Rhetoric-Based Questions. Please be on the lookout for our next podcast episode, number 230. Thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.